In what ways does the Coast Guard work with other agencies such as the FBI, ATF, NSA, etc.? Does the Department of Homeland Security head up the coordination?
Yeah, absolutely. The Department of Homeland Security heads up the coordination, as the Coast Guard is under that grouping, as well as most of the other agencies you've listed. And but to understand further what exactly has to do with port security, you have to understand the five missions of the Coast Guard, which are maritime safety. That primary goal is to eliminate deaths, injuries, and property damage on the coasts and in the high seas along America. It's also to reduce property damage with those things associated with fishing and container shipping. Also important to the Coast Guard is maritime security. It's to protect America's maritime borders from all intrusions by halting the flow of drugs, illegal immigrants, and it has a lot to do with suppressing violations of federal law regarding fisheries. Maritime mobility is another important aspect of the Coast Guard. Its goal is to facilitate maritime commerce and eliminate interruptions and impediments to the efficient and economic movement of goods and people. It's also trying to maximize the resources available to industry in the United States. One of the most important roles is national defense. It's to defend the nation. It's one of the 5 U.S. armed services, and they keep out our terrorists and all that. The protection of natural resources, it eliminates environmental damage and the degradation of natural resources associated with maritime transportation, fishing, and recreational boating. The man I interviewed, Petty Officer Jeffrey Ritter, worked in all 5 of these missions of the Coast Guard. One day he could be working with the Homeland Security on patrols looking for illegal immigrants or the importation of drugs. Other times he could be working with local law enforcement, promoting safe boating, and other times he could be working with game wardens, making sure that there's no illegal fishing going on. And other days he'd be working with the FBI and tracking down illegal aliens who were reportedly coming in on container boats. And most of these things can actually be found on the United States Coast Guard homepage.
So how does the Coast Guard know what boats to search? Does it come from solely the Coast Guard's intelligence, or does it come from multiple government agencies?
Well, just like all of the law enforcement agencies, the Coast Guard relies heavily on its own intelligence, but it also receives orders from higher up, such as the Department of Homeland Security, and also from the Commandant's office in Washington, D.C. The intel is shared a lot better than it used to be now with the Department of Homeland Security. So information from the FBI or the ATF is transparent to the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard also supplies other agencies with its information.
Okay, so what are the laws regarding search and seizure? Does the Coast Guard need a warrant to search a vessel? What if they want to get a vessel when it is still in international waters? How do they go about searching it?
Well, if you want to follow the law exactly as it's stated, I have it here. It says the Coast Guard shall enforce or assist in the enforcement of all applicable laws on, under, or over the high seas and waters subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. In addition to this, the Coast Guard allows its commissioned officers and its warrant officers to enforce any federal law on the U.S. waters as well as in international waters. They're the only federal law enforcement agency with jurisdiction here at home and also on the open seas. It enforces treaties and works with multiple agencies to counter drug trafficking and human trafficking as well.
So is there any confrontation over jurisdiction between the Coast Guard, local law enforcement, and other government agencies when it comes to port security?
No, the U.S. Coast Guard works and trains closely with all its joint agencies when it comes to port security. Everyone understands and operates within the perimeters of their given roles. Obviously, when it comes to port security, you want the experts to handle their respective situations.
Now, how long can the Coast Guard legally hold a vessel?
It really depends on the situation. However, the best way to articulate this is the Coast Guard can detain the vessel as long as they need to complete the mission or make the situation.
How would the Coast Guard go about responding to a vessel thought to be holding a biological or chemical threat, and how would they prevent the spread of contamination?
Well, with the latest threat of chemical and biological warfare, the Coast Guard has really moved up to speed with this challenge. Actually, every operational member of the Coast Guard goes through what's called hazardous materials training. This training is teaching the members what to do in case of a chemical or biological situation. Furthermore, most cutters have chemical and biological detection capabilities such as improved point detection systems, joint biological point detection systems, and biological agent detection dry filter units. If this were to occur, the Coast Guard would respond and contain the situation.
Does the Coast Guard have crews that can operate on land?
We do have units that would be able to assist on land. However, local law enforcement would normally take over.
Could you briefly describe the dog teams and say whether they're at every port in the U.S. or not?
Sure, they are at every port in the United States. Let me set this terminology up for you. The DOG, or Deployable Operations Group, is the command itself. The Marine Safety and Security teams you're referring to are a part of the DOG unit. The DOG establishes a single command authority to rapidly provide the Coast Guard, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and other interagency operational commanders adaptive force packages drawn from the U.S. Coast Guard's deployable specialized force units. The DOG's purpose is to develop systems and processes for standardized training, equipment, organization, planning, and scheduling of rapidly deployable specialized forces to execute mission objectives in support of tactical and operational commanders.
And what types of technologies is the Coast Guard embracing to combat these modern threats?
New, more accurate, and advanced weapons, advances in personal combat protective equipment, faster and more effective vessels, advancement in electronics and computer systems, and the overall advancement in navigation and marine technology makes the Coast Guard take great strides in combating modern threats.
Start again. Hi, my name's Carlos de la Santa Ana de la Guardia Sanchez, and I am a victim of the United States port security. I was smuggling myself and a few of my associates into the country with a whole bunch of drugs. You understand there's a drug war going on down in Mexico. And they caught me, needless to say. The dog teams, deployable operation groups, came in with their fancy technologies. They have x-ray machines that can see through container shipping, where we were all hiding with our drugs and guns. They also have, when we came to the port, they could have caught us there. We didn't know. They have sensors on their cranes that can pick up radioactive materials, which we didn't have. They can also, they have, when the containers are sitting inside the docks, on the docks and everything, waiting for the trucks and trains that are going to go pick them up, they have these sensitive cameras that instead of having to hire a security guard to watch every single camera, because there'd be so many cameras, it would require hundreds of security guards to watch them all. They have cameras with sensors on them that reduces the staff of the security guards, because then say camera 284 starts lighting up on their monitor, it means someone is walking in an area that's restricted. So if I were to try and steal something from a container ship or smuggle something that shouldn't be in that container ship, something that doesn't match the ship's manifest, then I could go over and unlock the door, but in the meantime I'm being video cameraed by the port security, in which either local law enforcement or the Coast Guard would deal with me.